Okay. Hello, everyone. We are back and we are live with the legal hour. So when I say we are back, that's not like technically true as far as these streaming platforms. For some of you who saw my post, I have been doing the legal hour as a radio show on 105.3 WVBH. I did it for several years and it stopped in 2020, right before the pandemic. It wasn't because of the pandemic, but stopped because of the pandemic. And now I'm back on the streaming platform. So we are super informal here. You may see my cat Oprah running around. You may see Joey's wife or daughter join us for a cameo. I'm super cool with that. I think that's great and fun. So we are bringing back the legal hour. Today's topic is going to be business law. To give you a little background about why I picked business law, I was helping a client a couple weeks ago, and I was telling her to get your CID and your PIN number and go online and do all your things. And she said, I can't figure out how to do that. And so we sat down during our meeting and I said, oh, because the whole process has changed. So I thought this would be a good time to reintroduce one of the topics that I did during the original production of the Legal Hour, which was business law within attorney and business owner Joey Andrews, who is now a representative for the Michigan legislature. And so I'm very, very thankful that Joey agreed to be my first guest on the new platform, as well as come back to discuss issues in regards to business law. So, Joey, if you can give us a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of background in regards to your business experience, and then we'll jump into tips and tricks.
Yeah, good to be back with you. It's been, like 7 years, I think, since we did the
Crazy.
first one. But when I was practicing law full time, or more full time, I guess, I did a lot of business and contract law, a lot of work with, mostly with LLCs, but a few nonprofits and, and larger companies. So I had a lot of experience on that end. And then, my family was in business for ever. So I did a lot of work on the businesses with my parents, and I owned my own business for a while that I set up and was sort of the partner that handled all of the documentation and everything for. So it was kind of a big part of my life up until I got into politics and kind of took a different direction.
And so neither of us are giving legal advice in this sense. This is for educational purposes only. I've put that on everything. And I just think it's important to show people the different types of businesses and to try to help as much as we can. But this does not create a legal relationship between either of us as attorneys or between my law firm. So we put that disclaimer out. But we're both excited. And this time, Joey, I'm going to be, somebody told me I was like really mean on DBAs last time. So I'm going to try to be a little softer about DBAs. But we're going to talk about DBAs as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of businesses, again, in the state of Michigan, starting with LLCs versus corporations. So, Joey, can you tell us what is the difference really between an LLC or a PLLC and then a corporation?
Yeah, so really an LLC or a PLLC is sort of a simpler form of a corporation. It was a device that was created, I don't remember how long ago, but it's a newer device than a C Corp or an S Corp. And it's basically for small businesses more than anything. I mean, there are some big businesses that are LLCs still, but the idea was that you wanted to start a small business, whether it was a store or you're a contractor, something like that. It gave you the ability to set something up that was a little bit simpler, didn't require all the shareholder agreements and that sort of stuff, but did give you the liability protection of having a corporation. It gave you that entity that kind of could exist to for you to put forward and stand between you and your business. And usually, I mean, I think at this point it's like wildly the number of businesses are LLCs. So, I don't have a number in front of me, but I would guess like probably 90% of businesses are LLCs.
Yeah. And that protection is the important part, right? So I'm a solo law firm right now. I could have just come out and said, hi, I'm Elizabeth McCree and I practice law. But I decided to do, in my case, a PLLC because I have to have a license to practice law in the state of Michigan. I have a PLLC. But that was in order to protect me so that if something happened, a slip and fall at my office or any of those things, somebody couldn't come after my personal assets. It's to protect my personal assets from what would be my business assets. Am I right about that?
Yeah, and that is really the important thing in all of this is that you want to hold your business separate from you, so that if something, God forbid, happens, there's a distinction between what is the business and what is you. So, like you said, if somebody slips and falls on the premises, what they can recover from is limited to what the business owns, not what you own. And importantly, that means that somebody couldn't, in a settlement, come after your house or your personal bank account or your retirement, something like that. They're limited to what the business owns, so it's that little bit of protection that goes a long way.
Right. And other examples of professionals, so people who would have to have that PLLC or even a PC if they had a corporation. Lawyers is one that I obviously know, but doctors,
Accountants.
accountants, psychiatrists, and psychologists in certain situations. What other examples would be? So, if somebody has, for instance, a license to do nails or to do hair, would they have to have a PLLC or a PC?
I think they can have an LLC, actually. I was just thinking about that one myself. I'm pretty sure they can still have an LLC. And I mean, I think really even, I mean, like a lawyer could technically have an LLC. The PLLC is sort of just like an extra formality. Yeah, generally anybody that has a professional license, would get a PLLC.
Yeah. And so I remember that when I first did mine 10 years ago now, that seems crazy. You submit the proof that I was a licensed attorney. And then every year when I go in to do my renewal, then I have to, at least continue to certify, even if I don't have to upload anything, that I'm still in the practice of that business.
Yeah. Yeah. And just another step for professional businesses. More or less because it's a professional, you might not necessarily have like a storefront, a doctor will work out of a hospital or, might work out of a medical complex they don't own. Lawyer might not necessarily work out of a law firm. They might just be on the go. So it's a way to create a business entity that's, a little bit more tailored to what a professional does versus, um, like a convenience store or restaurant or something like that.
Right. And the process to get this started with Laura, the state agency that, it certifies all this paperwork, is not super difficult. Like I said, I became as a single member LLC. So I went in and did the paperwork and said that I was the owner and gave an address. I gave a registered agent, which was myself, and a registered address. That's public, because if you do get sued or if they have to give you official documentation from the state, they have to give it to that resident agent. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, you want to have somebody to process serve, to contact if there's something that goes wrong. But that is the big benefit of the like the LLC, the limited liability corporation setup, is it's very, very simple to found an LLC.
Now, Joey, I think we lost you for a second. Let's see if we can get Joey back. While we wait for Joey to get back, I know that what he was getting into was some of the different fees. Professional liability, I think, is $75 originally, and for other corporations can be anywhere from $50 to $25. So you're never going to be, unless you want it to be done immediately and pay the rush fees, you're never going to be looking at more than $100 or so to start the corporation with Laura. And then when you get to the point of being able to recertify, you're looking at anywhere from $25 to $50 each time in order to do that. Let's see. Joey's back. Let's get Joey back in here.
Yeah, sorry about that. My internet
That's
connection.
all right. Like I said, we do all the things. Like I filled in for you. I was talking about the different fees in order to initially start your LLC or organization, and then the yearly renewals.
And I think it cut out as I was saying that it's so easy to start an LLC that even if you decide not to go forward with your business idea, it's worth it just to set one up while you're working on it, because it costs very little, and There's really no downside to, having one and then not going forward with it.
Right. And I have one right now that my friend and I started, and we're gonna get into that with partnership agreements. And we haven't been able to do much with it, but I still keep it up every year, because the big thing too is once you get the name, you want to keep the name, because there, if you look and search, there's several who have similar names. And we're going to talk about this a little bit with churches in a minute. But you want to make sure that you're not trying to use the same name. And you may need to add something like of Benton Harbor or of St. Joe or something of that nature in order to actually be able to use that name through the state of Michigan.
Yeah, and you want to check that anyway, because you can get into some trouble if you use the same name as or something that's too similar to an existing business that's in your immediate vicinity, because there are such things as trademarks and that sort of thing too. So
Right. You probably don't want to be the Whirlpool
right, even
widget
if your name is John
corporation.
McDonald, you might not want to be McDonald's.
Exactly. Exactly. I want to talk a little bit about nonprofits. So, nonprofits are an entity in the state of Michigan. I want to put this out there immediately. There's a difference between a Michigan nonprofit and a federally tax exempt 501c3 or other type of organization. Can you tell us a little bit of the difference between that state nonprofit and then a tax exempt organization?
I mean, I would start off by just saying if you want to go down the nonprofit route, you should be looking to be a federal nonprofit and do a 501c or a 501c3, C4, C6. There's a whole host of these 501c entities, but it really doesn't make a lot of sense to go down this road unless you're going to go for federal exemption. It's a big process to get federal exempt status, which is, I think, the biggest difference between being a state nonprofit or getting your federal exemption. It can take months or longer, depending on how quickly the IRS is processing. Right now, they're not doing much processing, but
Mhm.
I remember when I was doing a lot of this, it could take a year to get a 501c3, registered and established. That doesn't mean that you can't do business while you're waiting on your final tax exempt status. It just means that you can't hold yourself out as fully tax exempt until you have it.
Right.
And important to, I really want to emphasize this because I've run into this a couple times. The nonprofit entity that you create is tax exempt. You as a person are not tax exempt.
Right.
And people make this mistake all the time. They think, oh, I started a nonprofit, I don't have to pay taxes. No, you still have to pay taxes. Your business doesn't. But if you're drawing a paycheck, which I would assume you would be, you still have to pay income taxes. So don't think that there's some kind of like cheat code loophole here where you start a nonprofit and now suddenly you never have to pay taxes for the rest of your life. So really, I mean, a nonprofit is for that. And the main reason you start a nonprofit is because a corporation has a duty to its shareholders. And I don't want to go too far into the weeds on this, but when you have investors and you have shareholders, your duty is to your shareholders. And so that means that you need to do whatever you can to make money for your shareholders. And so if you start doing things that don't make money for your shareholders, i.e. like, giving money away, they can hold you as the owner responsible, and, your shareholders can decide that you don't get to own the business anymore. So the thing with a nonprofit is it has a designated nonprofit purpose and is explicitly for doing business in a way that does not generate a profit for its owners and shareholders. That doesn't mean a nonprofit can't make money. You can sell tickets and make money, or have a thrift shop and make money. It just means that the money that's being made isn't for the benefit of you or any shareholders. It's for the benefit of the purpose that the nonprofit exists for. And that's why the federal government and the state government has said you don't have to pay taxes because you're doing a public good, you're giving back. And so you don't need to pay taxes to the government because you're giving back.
Right.
Yeah.
So those PLLCs, LLCs, S Corps, C Corps, PCs, all are for-profit entities to be able to make profit for the individual owners, members, shareholders, however you set that up. Nonprofit, and And I want to talk about this because I get so many people that come to me and say, I want to help people. I want to help. I want to do a dance school. I want to, all different types of things that people are interested in helping. Particularly in our community, people want to help folks. And so then I tell them, okay, so for me, it's really about control, right? With a LLC, a PLLC, a corporation, you have control in regards to how your business operates. If you have a nonprofit, you can have shareholders in a nonprofit, but more than, I don't have the specific percentage, but most nonprofits run with a board of directors. For-profits can also have a board of directors who make sure that that business is profiting the shareholders and everyone else as it's set to be. But the nonprofit board really runs the nonprofit. So if you have a specific way that you want to do things and you're going to be opening the thrift shop or whatever the case may be, and you want certain policies and procedures in running your store, you may want to do an LLC or a corporation. And then if you want to have a nonprofit that helps supplement some of the things that happen within that store, then you can create a separate nonprofit, but still have the control in regards to how your business works.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, you can get pretty, I'll say, fancy with how you structure some of this stuff. I mean, in principle, you could have an LLC that owns a building and then a nonprofit that owns the business out of that operates out of that building. And that way you as the individual own the building separately from your nonprofit. And that way, if your nonprofit board decides one day that they want a new executive director, even though you started the nonprofit, you still own the property and you don't suddenly kind of lose everything alongside, a board action.
right.
There's a lot of ways that you can structure these different devices. You'll find, for instance, that a lot of landlords will often put individual houses or apartments into their own LLCs. Whenever you hear about people having like shell companies, that's kind of what they mean, right? Like an individual company that holds different assets as sort of part of a larger network of companies. There's a lot of different things you can do with LLCs and nonprofits and all of these devices to protect yourself and your investments and your assets in different ways.
Yeah. And it's not, you know, nefarious. It's the best thing in order to make sure that your what you want to actually happen takes place. If you have a nonprofit and it's federally tax exempt, if you're in Michigan, you're gonna have to do that nonprofit paperwork every year. Make sure that you have all your updated directors, things of that nature. But you also have federal requirements that you can't forget about. So you have to do that Form 990. That is separate from anything that you do on your own taxes or if you're paying yourself through the nonprofit. Like Joey said, please don't think that because you have a nonprofit that's basically like your bank account, your life, everything. No, that it doesn't work that way. So for a lot of folks who I know want to help the community, at the same time, you have to live. You have to be able to make a living. And so sometimes when I advise folks to do both an LLC and a nonprofit, it's because you really have a business idea that you can make money from, but then also have the nonprofit that helps support your overall goal and mission on wanting to help people.
And you said something important here too that I think is worth really highlighting, and that's um, whether it's a nonprofit, an LLC, corporation, whatever the case may be, it needs to act like a separate entity from you, the person. That's really important. The premise of starting a corporation is that you're starting this business that exists outside of you, and that's why you get the liability protection, because the law is saying, okay, you have this business or nonprofit that's doing its own thing, and that's separate from you as a person. And so if something goes wrong over here, we're gonna stop. We're putting a veil between. It's referred to as a corporate veil between you and the business. But when the court, if somebody takes you to court, somebody sues your business and says, well, I think I should be able to, go after your personal assets. What the court uses to test whether that's true is how the business acts. And so if the court sees that you have one bank account and you're paying for personal things and business things out of it, if the court sees that the business is just paying for your car and your house payment instead of paying you to make those payments, the court can and will say, you don't actually have a business here. You're just trying to protect, you're just trying to, basically use the business as a way to, protect yourself from doing stuff.
Right.
And it's referred to as piercing the corporate veil as the legal, term of art for it. But basically the court will say, this isn't a real business. You're not treating it like a real business. And then you lose that protection.
Right.
So it is very, very important that once you set up the business, it's got its own bank account, it's got its own licenses, everything is attaching itself to the business. So that if you do end up in court, you can say, pretty positively, the business is the business. I am the individual. We are separate.
Right. And getting back into that partnership, because I said we were going to jump into that as well. You can have partnership agreements. You can go to somebody. This is one that I see a lot of people go online and, print off forms and they say, husband and wife, we have a partnership. A lot of the times I figured out why they're doing that is because the bank says if you want to open a bank account for this business and you're husband and wife, you still need an operating agreement. So they'll go and they'll print off an operating agreement and take it and, not really go through it. Married people who own businesses together, an operating agreement is as ironclad and legally clad as a prenup, postnup, all those different things that you may or may not have done when you got married. A partnership is a marriage. So if you go into business with somebody else, in any type of way, you really do need to have an agreement that talks about what that looks like. What's the share? Is it 50-50? And there's different things that people might want to do. I don't know how this is going to continue in our current government, but there's contracts, there's grants and different things that are for women-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses. So if Joey and I were in business together and we wanted to apply for something that was specifically for minority owned or women owned, then I might own 51% and Joey might own 49% of that business in order to, show that it is women owned or minority owned. And again, when those opportunities are available, it doesn't, you make the business decision in order to be able to do the things to help make your business grow and thrive.
Yeah, and those laws exist to encourage, those sorts of arrangements to exist too. You see it with housing developments and that sort of thing all the time. If the developer of the property is, or the owner of the company is, a tribe member or woman, African American, various statuses like that. And the idea is they're trying to encourage businesses to bring more diverse people into their fold in order to benefit more of the community more widely. So it's some positive encouragement in that direction. But yeah, partnerships are solid. If you form a partnership with somebody, if you give them an ownership stake, they have that ownership stake. If you give somebody 25% of your company, if you sell the company, they get 25% of the company. I mean, it's not something you can just shirk on later.
Right. This is that Shark Tank when they're coming in and they're saying they're offering a percentage of the business, that this is particularly why, and those are legally binding relationships. So when I say not recommended on this slide and on the one pager that I'll put out, I'm not saying don't have a partnership agreement. I'm saying don't have just a partnership agreement. A partnership agreement should come along with the LLC, PLLC, S Corp, C Corp, things of that nature.
Yeah, and when it comes to the LLCs and the C corps and S corps, that's my daughter. When it comes to the LLCs and the C corps and the S corps, generally, if you have an operating agreement, you have a partnership agreement. If
Yeah.
if it's more than a single owner LLC or a single owner C corp S corp, your operating agreement is going to have a delineation of responsibilities and ownership percentages and that sort of thing in it. Usually when you get into that area, that's when you want to have the S corp or a C corp. You can have multi-member LLCs and you can even have stock within an LLC.
Yeah.
It's just a little more complicated and better suited for an S corp or a C corp once you decide you want to do ownership shares and that sort of thing. But that's why you don't want to just have a limited partnership agreement, because once you have the corporation, the partnership agreement's going to come with that, but the partnership agreement doesn't give you the liability protection. And fundamentally, the liability protection is why you want to have one of these business entities.
And you can change. I'm actually looking into this right now with my PLLC of considering to do S corp or S corp status, because S corp is really for small businesses. And the truth of the matter is, it's a big tax difference. And I think that that's something as we go forward in our current landscape that is, right now I think it's about 33% for. We're going to get into this in just a second, but for my personal taxes and including my LLC, my PLLC on that. But once you take that S corporation, then you have to do a separate tax return, but then you get the benefit as well of a corporation tax status, which is a whole lot less than 33, 35%.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's one of our next topics. But yeah, the tax rate does make a difference, and you will see more sophisticated businesses will move their status around depending on what is the most tax advantageous. And again, that's not illegal. That's not cheating. I mean, it's just when the government sets those tax rates and determines what benefits an LLC gets versus a corporation gets, those are policy decisions that are, have the effect of pushing the market in one way or another. And, there's different theories and different ideas on what is better, for the economy, for the ecosystem. And that's why those laws change all the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's be nice to DBAs and talk a
Yeah.
little bit about DBAs. So, can you let our audience know what a DBA is?
Yeah, so I guess I'll try to be nice because I think I was pretty hard on DBAs last time we did this too. The thing is people think that a DBA is the same thing as having a business because it says doing business as. All a DBA is doing is saying that like you or your company, even because companies can file a DBA as well, are holding themselves out as something other than themselves. So like, if I go and like do landscaping work around the area, but I don't do it, in like a full-time way, whatever, but I have a business card that says, specialty tree service, then, maybe I've got a DBA that says, this is Joey Andrews, but I'm doing business as specialty tree service. So then it's on record on file that specialty tree service is me. Now the difference is, there's no liability protection there, right? Like if I'm out there doing landscaping and I cut a tree branch the wrong way and it falls on somebody's house, they're not suing any entity called Specialty Tree Service because that doesn't exist. I'm the only one that exists, which means it's now my responsibility and it's on my insurance if I have it, to cover the cost of that limb falling on the house. So you really want to have the LLC, you want to or the corporation, you want to start the business, and the DBA can still be used within the business. You could have, say maybe you're the type of person that does like a lot of different odd jobs, right? Like maybe you do a little bit of landscaping, maybe you do a little bit of construction work, a little bit of this and that. So maybe you've got a company that's like Joey's Handyman, right? It's Joey's Handyman service. But I've got the DBA as specialty lawn care. I've got the DBA as roofing. I've got the DBA as, and that way you can have different business cards for the different services you're providing. That's a pretty classical way of using that.
Right.
But the DBA by itself is not protecting you. It is not a business. It's not an entity. It has no tax status. And so if something goes wrong, you're responsible if you don't have that entity there.
Yeah. And, so I think for creatives, a DBA may be a great idea. And like you said, you can use it within a business. So, I watched Versus last night, Cash Money versus No Limit. And I decide like, I'm going to start rapping. Like I'm going to keep my law office, but I'm also going to become a rapper too. So I start booking shows locally and I call myself the Benton Harbor Mia X, So I don't know, Joey, if any of this is hitting you, but I was very excited last night.
Context clues. Pick it up.
So if I'm the Benton Harbor Mia X and I start booking shows around town as a rapper in that sense, I can do a DBA as, the Benton Harbor Mia X because that's how I'm being booked. But I'm also going to create an LLC called, the Benton Harbor Mia X LLC in order to protect that from my law office as opposed to my personal. But, I'm going to use that DBA as a, pseudonym writing for a local paper or something of that nature. I think there are ways that DBAs can be used effectively, but they are not a legal protection against liability. And so, I that is the best that I can do in order to say, I think the DBAs can be, especially for creatives, can be an important tool to be able to use, especially if you're using, you as yourself are doing something, but you want to use a pseudonym as opposed to your legal name in order to do so. But you want to be able to get a check in the name of the Benton Harbor Mia X. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that, but you could do that.
Yeah, the thing I always struggle with is it's hard for me not to just say get the business anyway, because again, it is so easy to start an LLC. I mean, when you see, when you walk through the process on the Lara website, I mean, you can do this in an hour. It is really not that difficult to set one of these up. You want something stronger on your operating agreement than what Lara is going to give you as a default. That's one of those, like, helps you win in court when you have a stronger operating agreement. But even that, I mean, at this point, not that I want to, promote the use of online services for this sort of thing, because it's always good to have a lawyer look over your documents, but you can really go online at this point and get a model operating agreement that's going to get you like 85% of the way there.
Right.
It's, by not doing it, you're putting yourself at risk. And you might say, well, I'm just a DJ, what risk am I taking on? And it's easy to say that until you run into the situation where you're DJing a party and somebody, trips on your cord and falls, and they're suing you because they broke their arm. And now all of a sudden you're like, on the hook for this person's medical bills because you didn't have the business there.
Right. And then if you have an argument of, well, it actually was the venue, I kept telling them put the cord here and they wouldn't put it there, those kind of, and that's a whole nother, we probably could do a whole hour just on that alone.
Oh,
about now, once you have the business and you're actually like contracting with people to actually have a contract, please.
Oh, see, now that we could do that one, because contracts was my real thing. And I mean,
Yeah, that's a whole hour on its own. I'll have you back, because I yell at my friends who have businesses all the time, and they're like, so and so's trying to sue me for not doing such and such work, and I'll be like, send me the contract, and they'll be like, no, I'm already
Yeah.
upset.
I can't even, we're not going to digress here, but I can't tell you the number of times that's happened to me too, where somebody's reached out and been like, well, they promised. And I'm like, okay, do you have it in writing? Well,
Right.
no. Well,
Right. Text message nowadays, like, just like, I've used text messages as the contract before, but you have to have something.
Yep.
Something. Okay, yeah. So we'll put a pin in that. We'll do another episode on contracts once you have your business entity. So there are a couple of tips that I think both of us can agree are really important as we go forward. So we talked a little bit about LLCs, PLLCs being pass-throughs for tax purposes. So when I file my taxes, I include all the income from my PLLC, paying my interns, all the things that happen through that on my tax return, but underneath the law office, as opposed to a corporation, which would have to have a separate tax return.
Right. Yeah, and you generally will find LLCs don't have much of a tax advantage to them. In fact, it's usually much the opposite. Generally speaking, when you have an LLC, you're not able to take you're not going to be able to take the kind of deductions that you personally take when you just like draw a paycheck. And so that is one of the big reasons a lot of people will decide to take an S corp status, even with a smaller business, is you're being taxed at the corporate rate, which is a lower rate than the personal rate. And it basically depends on how much income your corporation is generating on whether or not you want to elect that status. Because again, with the pass-through status on the LLC, if your LLC is not making a ton of money, you're doing odd jobs and it's bringing in like $10,000-$20,000 a year, something like that, pass-through status is great. It's going to hit you at a low income level. Maybe it'll bump you up into like one higher tax bracket because you're like working your full-time job and then you got your LLC, but it's not that bad. Once your corporation really starts being successful, though, there does come a point, and if you have a good accountant, they're going to tell you this when you start to hit that level, that you're just, I mean, if you want to give more money to the government, that's very kind of you. But you're basically giving more money to the government than you have to.
Right.
And once you elect the S corp status, I can't. What is the corporate tax rate right now? 23%,
I think it's 23. Yeah.
23%. Yeah.
Or
So I mean,
35. Yeah.
yeah, basically, there's going to come a point pretty quickly if you start being successful where 23% is just lower. And at that point, too, that becomes separate from your income. So it helps you on two fronts. You're not getting taxed personally on that income, which means that you're only going to get taxed on the paycheck you draw. And so, if the company's paying you $50,000 a year, but the company's making $500,000 a year, you're getting taxed on 50,000. Company's getting taxed on its 500,000. Those are two separate things.
Right.
23% on 500,000 is going to be a lot less than what you would be paying if that was all passing through to you.
Right.
So, not to get too in the weeds, but it is, having that separate tax status can be a big benefit. But to your point, you have to file a separate tax return at that point, and there are a lot more requirements that come with S corp or C corp status. Having shareholders and that sort of thing that is a higher level of maintenance too.
Right. But if it's more money that can be then used for your business, again, like you said, if you want to give all your money to the government, great. But if you want to use it in, the ability to do things for your business, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. And so we'll talk a little bit about EINs, because once you have that corporation established, any of these corporations that we've talked about, you then want to create an EIN number. And I gave you the website. I'm going to post the tips and tricks that we've talked about today, so that you'll have that website. But you go on, I think the most it's ever taken me is when it's had to reload, and it might have taken me 6 minutes instead of 5 minutes to do. But you can then get a PDF copy of the letter that is the EIN number. And really, the way I describe it to people is the EIN number is the social security card for your business. So it's the identifier for your business.
Yeah, that's how I always describe it too. You're essentially, the law considers a business to be its own entity, its own, person. For everybody familiar with the Citizens United decision, a business is a corporation, a nonprofit is its own person as far as the law is concerned. And the EIN number is the social security number that kind of designates that entity to the IRS as its own person. And I mean, even like political campaign accounts have an EIN number. Anytime you're creating something that's different than you get an EIN number. And like you said, it takes a couple of minutes to fill out the form. It's a very painless process. But once you have that number, you use that to designate on pretty much every legal document that is the taxpayer entity.
Yeah. And so anything that I have that is owned by the law office, when I am getting paid for attorney services, I use the PLLC, and they don't get my social security number. They get my EIN number. I keep it all separate. And, that EIN number is helpful in order to do that and make it so that if you do end up in a situation that you don't pierce that veil, because everything is all separated with, this is your business stuff, this is your personal. And that leads us into the next topic, which is if you have a business that owns things, it needs to be owned in the name of the business. Let's see, because I'm going to put, let me see if I can actually, I'm going to show number one. So Mary Alice, a couple of minutes ago, Mary Alice Adams had put insurance, and that's really important. If you own a building or you rent a building for your business, you want the insurance policy, the renter's policy, the owner's policy, malpractice insurance. I have for practicing law. Doctors are going to have that as well. Any of those different types of things need to be in the name of your business.
Yes.
Unless they make you do it. There's a few minor situations where they make it be in your personal name, but generally all those general liability insurance, if you have a nonprofit and you have a board, your board needs to have board insurance in order to protect them as board members. So all of those different things need to be in the name of the business.
Yeah, and like you said, there are some instances, especially if the business is less than a year old, where a bank or an insurance company might ask for you to give a personal guarantee. And that's not always the same thing as it being in your name. It's just sort of this business hasn't existed for a year. So it's a risky proposition because, there's no backlog of you paying your bills and, operating independently. And so it's not uncommon in the first year of business for companies to say, we also want you as an individual to kind of, endorse this and say, like, if the business can't cover it, you're going to cover it. But that still doesn't mean you're on the hook personally for the liabilities. It's just a way of, a bank or an insurance company having an extra bit of certainty that the bills are going to get paid on time. Um, but there is absolutely no reason not to get an insurance policy either, for what it's worth. Insurance is
Yeah.
generally, especially liability insurance, is pretty cheap, unless you have a history of using liability insurance policies, then it can get a little more expensive. But
Right.
I think what ends up happening is people hear the dollar amount that the policy insures, and they somehow think that is what they're paying. So,
Right.
like, for instance, if you go to get a booth at the county fair, often they'll say you need to have an insurance, have like a small insurance policy, but it's for like up to $1 million of coverage. And so people will hear, oh, I need to have $1 million insurance policy. I don't have $1 million. $1 million insurance policy costs like $50.
Right.
And the reason that works that way is because the vast majority of insurance policies never get used.
Right.
And that's
We're paying into the pot for the folks that
right.
do
That
have to
same way
actually.
our health insurance works.
Mhm.
And it's sort of an educational moment, I think, for people, because they're like, well, I've been paying for insurance, but I've never used it. That's good, really. Like, the dream is to never use your insurance policy. But
Right.
that's how insurance policies stay cheap, is the pool of everybody paying into insurance and not using it is covering the person who has a fire or an accident, something like that. So you want to have your insurance policies. You especially want any property you own to be insured. And worth noting that if you have specialty equipment, you need to have that insured, kind of as its own either line item or separately. Because
Right.
just because you have your building insured doesn't necessarily mean all the contents get insured. And that's something people run into all the time, especially if they're doing like something kind of like machine shop related, car washes, CNC machines. There's all sorts of equipment that kind of go into a building but aren't the building. And you
Right.
don't ever want to be in the position where a fire happens and you're like, okay, well, I need to replace this $500,000 piece of equipment. And your insurance company goes, sorry, we'll pay for the building.
Yep. Farmers, these big John Deeres and, all these other, we have a lot of farms in our area.
Yes.
So, yeah, you have to have all those things insured. And some of them, you might have a trailer. Is it attached? Is it a vehicle, or is it, you have to go through all of that with your insurance person and make sure that you're dealing with it. We did have a question from Mary Alice Adams again about EIN numbers. So if you had a nonprofit and an LLC, would you have two separate EIN numbers, one for the nonprofit and one for the
Yes.
LLC?
Yeah, they're different entities. Even though you own and operate them both, they're still different entities. So you have to have a different EIN number for each.
Right. And then she asked a question as well that I think you would be do elected officials need insurance?
Actually, no. So elected officials have a pretty broad liability protection in general. Generally speaking, like, I think a lot of cities, local governments, they have their own insurance policy that kind of broadly covers everything.
Right.
But like for us at the state level, if somebody decides to sue me for something related to my role as an elected official, the state pays for legal counsel and all of that kind of stuff. But there's pretty broad liability protections you get for being in public office in general, because you kind of just have to hold yourself out there in that way. Now, that's not like criminal protection, obviously. Like, you commit a crime, you're still
Right.
liable for that. You get drunk and get in a car accident, you're still liable for that. But
Right.
there is some pretty broad liability protection on being an elected official, and so you don't necessarily. I don't even know that you really could get an insurance policy that would cover anything like that. At least not one that would actually matter. The kind of thing. Yeah, I can't imagine a case where you would need to do that. But usually there is some liability protection that like a local government entity will hold to sort of cover anything that might happen where they have to pay for lawyers.
Things that you would be immune from in your role, if you're doing it as part of your role, that's
Yeah,
a whole nother topic too. I think I did one for the legal hour one time about like attorney misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, things of that nature. So that might be another one that we revisit at some
super
point
interesting
in the future.
area there. Yeah, legal misconduct.
Yeah. And I also want to say, when we go back to the different types of corporations, if you're wanting to do this paperwork yourself, I agree. I think that you need to advise with legal counsel, because this is, a lot of people call their businesses their child. My law office is my baby. So I want to protect it. And there's certain things that, for instance, with a nonprofit, there's certain language that is not in the form if you just go online and try to do the form yourself, that I always add when I do nonprofits for other people, because I know that if they're going to then apply for 501c3 federal tax exemption, they need to have that paperwork in there, or it's going to take longer for the federal process. And you're not going to know that if you just go in there and fill out the form as they have it on the website. You need to add that in. So even if it's, you might not have an attorney who advises your nonprofit on a day-to-day basis, but you need to put in the expense that it would take on the front end in that situation to help get set up. And I do that all the time. I set people up, and then I tell them how to be able to do it going forward. Make sure you do your 990s. That's an accountant job. I don't do that part, but putting that part in on the front end is going to save you a lot of headache as you go forward, if you at least do it on the front part.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of, liability, if you have an attorney do your documents and they make a mistake, there's liability there that falls on them and not you. If you do all your stuff yourself, you're kind of taking on the risk at that point. And something we didn't really touch on, but is kind of, I think, worth noting on all of this, is that there's a legal predisposition towards individuals versus businesses on how sophisticated they are. And so, if you're a person and you make mistakes around like legal documentation and you didn't have a lawyer, the courts will generally view it a little more favorably, right? They're going to say like, well, look, you're not a lawyer. You probably shouldn't have been messing around with this stuff, but you made some mistakes, no harm, no foul, right? Like, as long as you didn't really screw up. The minute you become a business, you immediately become a sophisticated actor in the eyes of the court.
Yep.
So the court looks at that and they said, well, you wanted to have a business. You figured out how to set up a business.
Oh, we might have had Joey. We're going to see if he gets back in, but I'm going to pick up where he left off there, because there's a very important part of what he just stated. For instance, in Berrien County Trial Court, if you own homes in the name of a business in any way, then you have to have an attorney in order to file eviction proceedings. You cannot do that on your own. Even if you're doing it in the name of the business, an attorney has to file it, because they consider you to be more sophisticated, because you own your houses in an LLC or in a corporation or in a nonprofit corporation. So it's important in that situation for you to, be in a position where you can have an attorney be able to do that for you. But that's one local rule here in Berrien County that I know happens all the time, is people will come to me and say they won't let me file this paperwork because I own my house in the name of a business. You got Joey back.
My internet has decided this evening is just.
No, I understand. I filled in for you. So I talked about the example of if you own a house in Berrien County and you want to evict somebody and you're owning it in the name of a business, they require you to have an attorney to make that filing. You can't do it in the name of the business alone without an attorney filing it, because they consider you to be more sophisticated.
Yeah. And if you make mistakes as a business, you're going to be held more responsible for those mistakes, because the court is going to assume that you knew better.
Right.
And so to that end, you want to have a lawyer involved. And that doesn't mean you got to have somebody on retainer that you're paying every month. It just means that you should, when you're setting up your business and you're making some decisions, of a higher magnitude, you want to have somebody you can consult with. And for what it's worth, with LLCs, most attorneys that do this stuff will set one up for you for a couple $100.
Yeah.
Because it really does not take that much time.
Right. Exactly. All right, so let's get into the new Michigan system. As I said, my client came to me and said, I'm not the CID and PIN number thing. It's not working anymore. And I looked and I said, you're absolutely right. They have changed the whole system. So let me figure it out. So I did some screenshots and used a different email. So that's one thing too. I know, trust me, I'm so tired of emails. I probably have like 5 or 6 different emails at this point that I have to use on a regular basis, but I've tried to combine as many in the inboxes as I can. But if you have different businesses, you want to be able to separate them, so that your different insurance policies, different notices all come to that specific email, even if they're coming to a combined email box. So I used a different email than the one that I have for my businesses to go through the process to show people how to log in. So I have given you on the one pager that I'm going to upload after we finish up today, just the main website. This is the main website that is now called MI Login for Businesses. So you will see, and I don't know how, if you're on your phone, you're obviously going to have to make this a little bit bigger. But down at the bottom of that page, it says create an account if you don't already have an account. You may have an account because some of this is connected. Like if you renewed your driver's license online, some of this may be connected. Another reason that you need a separate email from your personal email to your business email. So if you're going to register a new account, you have to go through the email verification process. So you have to put your email in. It will then send you an email. So it sent me an email and told me to put in the passcode, all that two-factor verification things that they do nowadays. So you will go in, go through your email, get the verification for that business email. Then you're going to set up your profile. This does not ask for the name of the business at this point. This asks for your individual name. So this is one of those situations where you're using your name, but then you're going to be able to add your business or businesses into it later. Then it's going to ask you for a work phone verification. So I use my cell phone for personal as well as business. I'm working on doing something better with that because that's become an issue over the years. But, so if I put in my work cell phone here, it's going to do the same thing with the verification. It's going to call you with the code. It will not text you on the work phone verification. It's going to call you. So then you have to put in the numbers. It gives you some numbers beforehand, but then it will call you and tell you the numbers. It'll repeat it a couple of times and let you be able to push the button if you're not doing it quick enough. But then you'll have that work phone verification. And then you can also do a mobile phone verification. So if you have a business selling widgets, that's the thing we say in law school all the time. So you have an office, and your office has an office phone, and then you also have a mobile number because you mobilely go out to sell widgets. You can put both the office number and then your individual mobile number in there as well, and it'll go through the same process to verify you through two-factor authentication. Once you go through all of that, then you will create your user ID. They pretty much tell you what your user ID is going to be, which is your name and then a 4-digit code that you pick. This is one thing that I may ask that you take back to your group in the legislature, because it's going to be pretty easy for people to maybe try to figure out people's user IDs if they know that it's their name. So that's a kind of weird thing, Joey, that you might want to take back to your crew.
That's a good flag for Laura.
Yeah. I think that's one that. But as of right now, it's going to be your name and like a 4-digit number. Then you're going to create your password that has to have all the different, symbols, characters, all those kind of things that we have to have nowadays. And once you do that, then you'll get into the home page. So here I am in the home page under the other email that I used in order to create it. And then you're going to be able to start looking into which services you want to go through. This is going to be super small, but it's going to say discover the different online services that are available to you. The last one that is on this page is LARA, the Licensing and Regulation Agency, where you can file for a new business or renew for a current business that you already have. So on the left-hand side here, you're going to want to pick LARA. And once you select LARA, this is super small. Nobody's going to be able to read this. But on the right-hand side, it gives you all the different things. So if you have an adult foster home, that is under LARA. That's actually the first thing listed. But you're going to go all the way down to business entity, MI business. So you're going to go through LARA, then to MI business. Joey, I hope you're taking this down to take this back, because this is a pretty lengthy process for people to try to go through. So once you select MI business through LARA, you're wanting to be approved for the registry portal. So you have to accept the terms and conditions, and then it's going to, you don't have to sign out. Both times I refreshed like 5 minutes later, and then I was in. It didn't take long to be approved, but it has to like verify that you're a person and you have to accept the terms and conditions. Once you're in the My Business registry portal, now you on that lower left hand side, it has that business entity search that we used to be able to get to a little bit easier so that I can look up any other business and who their registered agent is and all their documents. And it also is going to have the link there for you to be able to file for a new business or to renew an existing business. To do that, then you go to the business search. So if I'm on this business search page, I'm putting in the law office of Elizabeth L. McCree, PLLC. It will come up and then it will allow me to claim that business. So you want to go in and do this fairly quickly. I went and claimed all my businesses to make sure that they only show up for me. So if anybody else tried to claim my businesses, then it's going to not let them do that and also notify me that somebody else tried to claim my business. So I'm assuming the changes that the state is doing is to make people's businesses more secure, but it is a much different process than just going to michigan.gov/Laura and going to Corp Online and refiling your documents. You have to create a profile and you have to verify your profile with your phone number and your email, I guess, in order to have some layered protections.
Yeah, and they're doing that across the state right now. Anybody who's had to renew their tags recently has probably interacted with the new SOS website.
Yeah.
Their portal, I think, is a little bit easier to interact with and a little bit cleaner, but that's kind of the direction everybody's, all the state websites have been kind of moving in.
Yeah. And that's what another reason why I'm saying to have that different email address, because if I had put in my other personal email that I've had since I was in high school, which is connected to everything else, it would have pulled up my Secretary of State information and all of that. And this is for my business. So that's you need to have that business email. My email for my business is an Outlook email. It doesn't have, you don't have to pay a web browser to have a specific, at Elm Law Office or whatever the case may be. You don't have to do that and pay extra money for it. You can, just create another email address that will filter into the same email box. I don't know how I figured out how to do that. My interns have helped me do a lot of that stuff, but you don't have to pay anything extra for it. But you don't want to mix your personal email with your business email, especially on a website like this.
Gmail lets you do that kind of thing too. Once you have like a Google account, you can create like sub email addresses that can be really helpful. I want to make sure I noted this. I was just thinking about this as we were going through this. Just because you start a business in Michigan, and this is relevant because we're very close to the border, doesn't mean you can operate in any state in the country. Yes. So just worth being aware of that if you're especially if you're a business that's offering a service where you might go somewhere, you really do want to check what the laws are in Indiana, because you may also need to create a business entity in Indiana. Yes. Alongside your Michigan business for when you're doing work in the state of Indiana, if you're getting paid for that work in Indiana, anything like that. So, some states have laws that basically say, like, as long as you have a registered business in the state you live in, we're good with that. But not every state has that rule. So you may need to create an LLC in each individual state you want to operate in. So I just bring that up, like I said, because we're really close to the borders with Indiana and Illinois. Ohio's not that far away either. And so you don't want to get caught thinking I'm good, and then all of a sudden you're getting a tax notice from the state of Indiana or something saying, hey, we heard you've been operating in our state without a license, and you owe us a bunch of money now.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. And so that's, if I'm inactive in Georgia right now practicing law, but if I wanted to become active again and then go down there and open an office, so I had an office in Michigan and an office in Georgia, I need to talk with one of my friends who does business law down there to say, can I use, my PLLC, or do I need to create another entity? If I create another entity, then I need to have another EIN number. I need to do all of the things. I may have some combined bank accounts in that situation. But, those are things that, especially if you're operating in many other states, and not just I sell products to people in all 50 states and I go mail them off, but if you're actually conducting business in that place, then you do
Yes.
need to definitely make sure that your entity will either work or that if you need to create a new one.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
that is the key distinction, right? Like if I run an Etsy store in Michigan and I'm shipping stuff out all over the country, that's fine. That's a different kind of thing. But it's if you're actually either, especially if you're going to be physically present in that state doing business, that's a definite flag.
Right.
But if the service you offer has you doing something physical in the state, often the state is going to say, "Hey, you're doing business here, and you need to register with us too."
Right.
Um, lawyers will often, instead of having to get licensed in another state, they'll find somebody to partner with. You see that a lot in our area. That law firms both in South Bend and up here, they'll have an attorney that's got a license in one state or the other, and that way the firm can operate in that state because it's got a license that it can operate under. So with
Yeah.
licensed professionals, you'll see that as sort of a workaround. Instead of having to get licensed in every single state, you just find a partner that has that license, and then benefits both sides of the equation.
Yep. And so we did have Mary Alice switch pages. So she's on her other page now. So she said, "Can we register through Laura?" Answer is yes. So I will be posting in a few minutes. Let's see if it'll show her comment again. My little one pager that I'm going to start putting out after I do these lives that will give you the website to get to where I started from, which is at MI Login for Business, and walk you all the way through the process. And this will be saved so that you can go back, come to the end of it, and then be able to go through the process in order to log yourself through if you get stuck through the process. But I'll at least give you the initial URL that you can click on in order to get to the page to be able to set up your current business. Because if you have a current business that you need to renew, so all your LLCs, S Corps, everything is February 15th, I think is the date every year, day after Valentine's Day. You'll be already set up to do that because, like I said, I really do think you need to go immediately and claim your businesses. Even if you're not going to be doing this renewal process until February, go claim your businesses now.
Yeah, I think that's always smart in general. Like I said at the beginning of this, even if you just have the idea, you might as well claim the name and and get all that put together. And then if you don't end up going forward with it, it's really no big deal. But you don't ever want to be in a situation where you had this idea, it all kind of worked out, and then you didn't off, and now you're in trouble. And it's such an easy process. There's really no reason not to do it.
Yeah. So that hour goes by super quick, Joey. I told you. See, so we've already got like 5 other topics that we'll get back together and talk about.
Yeah, we should definitely come back and talk about contracts sometime. I feel
Yes.
like, especially with some of the stuff that goes on in landlord tenant, there's some stuff we could go over.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had a yeah. Landlord tenant is. We might do a series on landlord tenant. It is. There's a lot going on. So yes, we will definitely get back together. Thank you again for agreeing to let me try to make all these streaming things work and being a guest again and coming back after all this time to bring this topic forward.
Oh, it worked out pretty well, other than my internet dropping a couple times on
Yes.
us.
Yeah, it happens. So we cover each other. And we did get a comment that says we need more educational information like this, which is all the reason that I wanted to bring the legal hour back. Ever since I stopped it in 2020, I kept saying, we need to bring it back. And so I do have a couple of the old videos that I will be posting and then seeing if people will join me again. Like Representative Andrews has joined me back after several years to kind of update some of the topics that we discussed before. So looking forward to it and being able to do it in our different locations and having a little bit more relaxed and being able to get the responses from folks. So thank you so much, Representative Joey Andrews.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Now let's see if I can actually end the stream.